Zdravo svima i dobrodošli u novu epizodu Uručenja u kojoj je gost neko ko je svoje košarkaške snove ispunio radeći za televizijsku mrežu najbolje košarkaške lige sveta. Emisija The Starters bila je praktično preteča onoga što danas poznajemo kao podcast ili neku drugu sličnu formu i ona je trajala više od 15 godina. Putovanja, košarka, najlepše moguće dvorane širom sveta, najveća košarkaška imena i intervjui sa njima i sve to u okviru NBA TV produkcije. Zvuči kao neki posao iz snova, ali onda je odlučio da je vreme za nešto drugo. Dao je otkaz da bi mogao da radi dve stvari koje najviše voli – da putuje i igra basket. Sada, na najinteresantnijim otvorenim terenima na svetu, upoznaje sebi slične ljubitelje košarke i uživa u pričama koje ne planira unapred, već mu se same nameću. Bio je na srpskom evroligaškom derbiju, u Frankfurtu je dok je čekao konekciju na aerodromu upoznao devojku iz Srbije koja igra basket, sa košarkaškog terena u Dubrovniku ugledao je možda i najlepši prizor, a sa legendarnih terena na našem Kališu nije otišao bez par piva i rakija. Pričao je sa Lebronom, šutirao trojke sa Stefom Karijem, a otac Luke Dončića otkrio mu je šta se krije u balkanskom sportskom mentalitetu. O svemu tome i još mnogo čemu u narednih sat i po, a naš gost je Li Elis.
So, for the beginning of the conversation, we didn't see each other actually after the first derby in the EuroLeague here in Belgrade between Crvena Zvezda and Partizan. And I would like to start with that story, with you coming to Belgrade. It wasn't your first time here, but never mind, it was your first time being on Serbian Derby, and it was historical for us. So we met each other there, and I have to be honest with you, for the beginning of this conversation, I didn't know if you are coming or anybody else from the EuroLeague. I didn't know who I was going to work with. And then I saw you and I was like, oh, he's that guy. He was always talking about the NBA and everything, and now he's in EuroLeague. So I was glad to see you. And after the everything that we did and recorded there, and after those 2 days that we've spent together actually here, we were posting about it, the pictures and everything on social medias. And a lot of my friends who watched the NBA when we were younger was texting me about you. Oh my God, you did a job with Li Elis and things like that. And I was like, yeah. I didn't even know if you're coming or somebody else. So yeah, it was pretty. I was pretty surprised by you coming here and working with the EuroLeague. Anyway, let's start with that Serbian derby. So after that, we can speak about everything that you do now. Mm-hmm. But first, can you describe for the beginning a part of your impressions from that game?
So there was so much hype building up to it. People were saying, like, if you go to a derby, the Belgrade derby is the biggest one you can get to. And so when you have high expectations, you know, it's really hard to live up to those. You know, if someone says, hey, this is the best movie you've ever seen, then you're like, well, I expect it to be like that. And sometimes it's a letdown. But I can say it was not a letdown at all there in Belgrade. I mean, leading up to it, talking to people on the street, interviewing people, even including yourself there was so much excitement and so much almost tension in the air as well, because people are like, you know, this game means more than just a normal game. And so, you know, then when we got to the game, it was nearly 2 hours before the game even tipped off, and the crowd was going crazy. I mean, it wasn't full yet, but they were singing and chanting. And of course, when Red Star came out to warm up, you know, the noise that people made just to try to put them off was incredible. And then it was the opposite, of course, when Partizan came out, when their fans started cheering and supporting them, and the coach came out as well. I mean, it was incredible. And then the game, I mean, every single possession felt like that was the key possession of the game. That was the turning point. And I was there just going, oh my God, I've never, you know, I'm not Serbian, I'm not from Belgrade or anything like that, but I could feel the tension in the air. And that was a really good atmosphere to be a part of. So it was very, very exciting. And then the end, I mean, look, you know, when that shot went in there from Nedovic at the end, I was like, uh-oh, I'm not sure what's going to happen here. I'm not sure how the crowd's going to respond, because people have said sometimes those derbies, the crowds can go a bit crazy and they can get a bit over the top. But it wasn't really like that. I never felt unsafe or that I was in danger. I mean, people were disappointed, understandably, but it was actually like, oh, okay, we lost. We can accept it, even though they weren't happy. People can accept it. And the Red Star fans were cheering up in the crowd. They had their shirts off, and I was like, oh my God, what's going on up there? But it was such an awesome experience for someone who's, you know, I've been to basketball in a lot of different countries around the world, in I've been a basketball fan my life, and I've covered the NBA here, and I've been to many big NBA finals games and things like that. But the atmosphere for that game in particular was something I've never experienced. And, I came away from it, usually at the end of the night, you're tired from a long couple of days, big, long trip I had as well. But it was almost like the adrenaline was flowing through my body there. So I had so much fun, and it was such a great experience.
Yeah, you can only imagine how players actually feel down there on the court. Yeah.
To me, the communication must be so hard from the coaches to the players, especially when you've got so many players from different backgrounds who don't necessarily speak the local language. Because Dante Exum, of course, plays there for Partizan, and I said that to him. I said, "How do you communicate with your players and your coaches if you don't speak the language?" And it's on top of that, you got 20,000 people screaming and chanting and singing. And he was just kind of like, "You just play basketball. That's all you can do at that point." And I was like, "Yeah, I guess that's the answer."
Yeah. So I told you that it wasn't your first time actually in Belgrade now for the derby. You've already been here. And what can you say about the Belgrade and that connection with basketball that this city has actually, and all the people around it, not only me and you, which are media guys, but also, people from the supermarkets or the waiter in the cafe or something like that.
So basketball in the Balkans for me has always been a really a part of basketball culture, because I grew up, I'm a little bit older than you, Alexandra. I grew up and I remember Dražen Petrovic, of course, making one of the first really big European stars to make it in the NBA. It started off slow with Portland, then to New Jersey. But now when I look at the NBA, I mean, you only need to look at the last two MVPs or the back-to-back MVP, Nikola Jokic, who's obviously Serbian, and then Luka Doncic might win it this year. Maybe Jokic wins it again. Giannis is from Greece, in a similar area here. So this area of the world, or that area of the world, has always had a very big basketball history and culture. And so when I came up with this idea that I wanted to play basketball around the world, that was pretty much the first destination I chose, was Slovenia, Croatia, and Serbia, because there's a link I saw between where basketball is now and where it started with Dražen. And so when I started researching courts, one of the first ones I found was Kalemegdan Park there, which was like playing in the Belgrade Fortress. And I was just like, oh my God, I have to play there. I must play there. And so when I started putting the trip together, I was like, right, I put a message on social media, and a lot of people from Serbia said, "You've got to come and play here." And so we arranged it, and I went and played there, and it was so much fun. I mean, it was such an awesome experience, such a great atmosphere. The weather was perfect as well. I think it started pouring with rain the day after I played. So, sometimes those things just fall your way. The luck goes your way. But we played. I met some great people. We had a couple of beers, and I've stayed in touch with some of the people there from that game. And so my experience in Serbia and Croatia and Slovenia and Greece, it was so incredibly exciting because people welcomed me so much. I got to try their local foods. I was drinking rakia at all sorts of hours during the day, and it was just a really incredible experience. So I leave there knowing that I definitely want to come back and play again and meet some more people there and have some more experiences there, because it was funny. So the funny thing is, I'm a bit of a vegetarian. I'm not a full-time vegetarian. And someone said to me, they said, "Well, good luck trying to be a vegetarian in Serbia." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And so the first day I went there, there's a little cafe, you probably know it, right near the fortress there.
Yeah.
And the waitress came over and she said to me, she gave me the menu, and I was looking, and I said, "Oh, what vegetarian options do you have?" And she just like,
like no.
She can have. Yeah, she goes, "You can have the chicken if you like." And I was like, "Oh, okay, that'll do." But look, the thing is, food is a very big part of the travel experience for me. And some of the food I had there was incredible. So I have such fond memories. And I was so excited when the EuroLeague people contacted me and said, "Hey, we know you were just in Belgrade," because I was only there like 2 or 3 weeks before the derby. And they said, "Do you want to go back to Belgrade?" I was like, "Yes, in a second. Like, let me go back there." So hopefully I'll be there again before too long.
Yeah. So one part of the experience was only, let's say, yours. I mean, about Belgrade, but the other part was with EuroLeague and that derby game between Crvena Zvezda and Partizan. How everything happened in that cooperation with the EuroLeague? Let's start with that. So after that we can speak about your NBA part of the career, which is a bigger one probably.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think because I had been promoting what I was doing on social media, and people who have followed me in the NBA, people connected to EuroLeague said, "Hey, would you like to be a part of this? We're thinking, or we're going out there to cover the big derby games. They were in Spain just last week for Madrid and Barcelona. There's a couple more on the calendar. And so I was asked by EuroLeague to go out there and be a part of it. And so I wasn't exactly sure what to expect. Again, working in the basketball media in America is just different to working in other countries. But I saw it as a great opportunity to learn and to broaden my horizons and to experience a different culture and a different sort of way of covering basketball. And so when they asked me, I did not hesitate at all. I just said, even though I'd just come back from basically a sort of 3-week trip, I had to say to my wife, I said, is that okay if I take another week off here and go and work? And she was very supportive. She's like, yeah, go. That'll be a great experience. And it was. And so, hopefully I'll be doing some more work with EuroLeague down the road. I mean, this was just a sort of one-off thing. There was no promise or guarantee of any extra work, but I had a good time. They seemed to like it. EuroLeague tweeted it and put it on Instagram, and you were in that feature as well there. I think that's maybe what they really wanted. They saw you there, Alex, and they were like, oh, we've got to put this out there. So it was so much fun, again, seeing just what basketball and what that derby meant to the people of Belgrade and the entire country of Serbia.
Yeah. One of my friends actually played against you in that game on the Belgrade Fortress. So he said it was a quite funny experience for him, and he was so glad to meet you actually. And he texted me on Instagram after I posted that picture with you. So yeah, people remember you here, and I think that probably for him, I mean, he's an example, like he was your fan from very young ages, like we were in high school or maybe before that, because he used to stay awake during the night to watch the NBA and everything that you used to work then. Do you remember what was your first experience with the European basketball, but like in some direct way, like when did you and where did you have a chance to feel the European basketball for the first time?
Well, I mean, technically it was in Russia, actually. I was in Moscow it was about 17 years ago. And I was there. I wanted to experience like New Year's Eve in Red Square in Moscow. So I went out there and there's a big game between Cheska and I think it was St. Petersburg. I can't remember the exact name of the team there, but yeah. Zenit, that's right, yeah. And so I went to that game, and it was crazy as well there because it was such a wild atmosphere, and it was the middle of winter, so it was freezing cold. It was hard to get to the arena. But once I got there, again, seeing just how emotional and passionate the fans were, you don't get a lot of that for regular season NBA games. There are some NBA games like that, but most of the time it's not quite that intense atmosphere. And I remember thinking, like, is it like this every game? And a couple of people I was speaking to said, yeah, people just love basketball here like that. The craziest thing I think, though, is, I've lived in Australia and Canada, the United States and England. And so smoking is kind of pretty much banned at any indoor arenas, but in Moscow, at halftime, people just go downstairs and it's like a bushfire. It was just like smoke everywhere. So I was just like, whoa, it was a shock to the system because, like I say, most places I had been at that point, in restaurants and bars and cafes and things like that and nightclubs and things had pretty much outlawed smoking. So to have it at a sporting event was an unusual experience. But it's been great. I mean, I went to a few games in England as well. Not quite the same there because basketball's not quite as people aren't quite as big on basketball as they are in other parts of Europe. But I really hope to get to another derby, especially like in places like Istanbul or Greece, like Athens, because after I was in Belgrade, people said, you've got to go to Panathinaikos, Olympiakos, and Fenerbahce and Enes, I believe it is, for Istanbul. So now that I've had a taste of it in Belgrade, I really want to experience it in other cities, but the standard is very high. Like these other cities have to be just as crazy as the Serbians were in Belgrade there. I'm not sure if they can live up to it, but hopefully that is true.
Yeah, we spoke about Kaunas and Žalgiris a little bit before we started recording this conversation, and I can recommend you that Žalgirio Arena in Kaunas. But for Žalgiris games in the EuroLeague and also in domestic championship, they're really crazy. They're almost crazy as we are crazy here. So yeah, you should go there, and you should try it. Actually, you should try it before the Final Four maybe, because I think during the Final Four it's another kind of the atmosphere, because of the other 4 teams are there and everyone are, the passion is pretty different. That was the case in Belgrade also. Have you been to Belgrade for the Final Four maybe last year or for the first one? No.
Yeah, no, unfortunately not. The first time I was in Belgrade was in November of last year, just before the derby. So yeah, but again, my life and my career sort of kept me in the United States for the last, decade plus, certainly for work reasons anyway. And so I like to travel with my family a lot. And my wife is from Peru. Her sister lives in London. My brother lives in London. We've got family and friends sort of scattered all around the world. So we try to visit them when we can in the off season. And it hadn't taken us to the Balkans at that point. And that was, again, part of the reason why I chose that area for my new career, was to be like, well, I get to experience one of the most beautiful parts of the world as well. So
yeah. So when somebody is listening to you, people are mostly like, he's traveling around the world. He's playing some basketball all the time. He has a camera with him and the mic, and it sounds pretty much like a dream job, when you see it like that. But how everything started, actually?
So I had been working for the last 11 years covering the NBA in a podcast and on NBA TV, which is where probably some of your friends saw me. And then the last 3 years as a podcast again for The Athletic. And it's been great. I've really enjoyed it. But there was just a part of me that wanted to experience something else. And every time I have traveled, I always try to just play basketball wherever I can on the streets, like in Berlin or Barcelona or anywhere. And what would happen was people would send me messages in Instagram and say, hey, if you're in my city, come and play. And so many of those messages came in. And I just started thinking about it. And I was like, I wonder if I could turn this into a career, because now with social media and with, the access to, you can sort of create all your own content. I thought maybe if I take people up on these offers and go to their cities and play and get to experience it and meet the people and drink and eat and have fun, I can turn that into a series. So that's what I'm hoping to do. I'm hoping at some point Netflix or Amazon Prime or whoever will say, hey, this is a great idea. We'll come and turn it into a feature series for you. Because I think there is some appeal there, because for me, basketball is the hook of like, hey, I'm going to play basketball and look at these great, again, Belgrade Fortress and Dubrovnik and other parts of Slovenia there. That's appealing, but then you get to meet the people and then you get to hear the stories. And some of the people, especially in Belgrade there, told me some incredible stories about how they had followed me ever since they were a kid, and why they're a Partizan fan, and maybe their dad's a Red Star fan or whatever. So there's all these great, interesting stories, and I hope to capture that a lot more on my second trip here in Africa, where I have a bit more organization as far as a camera crew and things like that. The first trip to the Balkans was more about just do it, see what I can learn from that, and see what I can use to build that out into a better series down the road. So I do hope and expect at some point to return to the Balkans and shoot it in a bit of a more professional way. And then again, hopefully one of the streaming services will come along and say, hey, would you like us to help you produce that? And I'll say, yes, I would. And I can then concentrate on playing the games, meeting the people, and having fun. So that's my goal. That's the long-term goal. In the short term right now, it's about just trying to create sort of awareness of what I'm doing and support across various platforms. And it's been a fun experience. I mean, traveling for me, I know you've traveled quite a lot yourself. I mean, I think it's the best education you can have in life, because you meet people, you learn more about yourself, you learn so much about different countries and different people. And that to me is something that you can never run out of great experiences when you travel. It's always somewhere new and somewhere different, and places that you might not have even thought about. All of a sudden someone says, hey, you've got to go here, you've got to go there. Like you just told me about Lithuania there with Knaus. It's like I've sort of thought about that, but I haven't really planned it yet. But hopefully I can include that on my trip list here at some point soon.
Yeah, you will see in Kaunas, maybe here we smoke a lot, but in Kaunas they serve alcohol during the whole game, in the whole arena. It's unbelievable. They're all drunk inside the arena, but they're pretty calm, actually. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. But what was the most interesting part for me in all those, let's say, short forms on your YouTube channel and everything, was that part that is a little bit behind the basketball, that story around the court. Maybe if it's food or some traditional drink out there, or somebody's father or mom, which is in connection with basketball or something like that. Because that makes a lot of sense to people who are maybe not basketball lovers, as much as we are, probably for my mom or my grandmom or somebody, but they're gonna watch it anyway because they will find something new or to learn something new. So, what was the most interesting thing for you in those terms? Which country, or did you have any kind of a cultural shock in some of those countries, or what do you expect in Africa, for example, or if you've already been there, maybe in Egypt, or if I'm not mistaken, yeah. But what was your experience in those terms? Not only about basketball, but also those things, the people that you are talking to.
Well, the two best experiences that I got were I got to meet, Luka Doncic's father in Ljubljana. And so I spoke with a friend I have there and I said, do you think I could get an interview with his dad? And he said, well, I can ask him and we can try to arrange it. And so we had the interview and it was really, really interesting. I mean, he's such a fascinating person to talk to, Sasha. And then afterwards he said, do you want to go out for a dinner? And, a traditional Slovenian dinner. And I was like, yes, 100%. That's what I want to do. Like, I don't just want to eat, go back to the hotel and eat like, room service food or anything like that. When I'm in these countries, I want to experience like the local food. And so we went out. And this dinner, I thought it was probably going to be an hour and a half, 2 hours of dinner. It was going for like 5 hours and it was still going strong there. And Sasha was still ordering food and drinking wine. And I was just like, oh my God, I'm just full as anything. I'm drunk. I said, I've got to catch a bus to Zagreb in the morning. I had to leave. It was like 12 o'clock, nearly, maybe 1 o'clock in the morning. Sasha's like, drink, stay. This is fun, talk. And I'm just like, oh my God, this is great. So that was a really, really fulfilling experience because that to me, again, is what traveling is about. Like when someone welcomes you into their city, most of the time people want to show off to you, say, hey, look at how cool this city is and look how great the food is and the service. And it really was. And then on top of that, just interesting talking to a guy who's so well known right now because obviously his son is one of the greatest basketball players in the world and might win an MVP. And then funnily enough, when I got to Zagreb, as I mentioned earlier, Dražen Petrović was such a influential player in the basketball world. I went to his museum and I was just walking around and I was taking in all the accolades and the jerseys and the things that he had achieved. And I saw a door that was open and I didn't quite know what it was. And so I just walked in the door and immediately I recognized his mother sitting at the table. And I was like, oh my God, that's Dražen's mother. And I was like, I sort of was a bit embarrassed. I thought, I should leave her. I didn't mean to interrupt. But instead, she stopped what she was doing and she welcomed me in and she started showing me off like his 75th anniversary trophy there that he had and all these other things that he'd done. And the funniest thing was she doesn't really speak English. She speaks more Italian and Croatian, I guess. And I don't really speak Italian or Croatian. I speak a bit of Spanish through my wife being Peruvian. So she was speaking Italian. I was kind of speaking Spanish, but she was just so welcoming. And normally I just, again, like this was not planned. I didn't have anyone sort of organize this in advance. But instead, she showed me around Biserka and I was just like, wow, this is such an incredible experience. And she showed me all the Dream Team footage and photos and posters. And it was such an awesome experience. I mean, I would have loved to have been able to record that because I think it would have made a great feature. But at the same time, I didn't know it was going to happen. And then sometimes you don't just want to get your camera out and start, shoving it in people's face, especially when there's a bit of a language barrier there. So it was one of those experiences that I'll take with me that I'll remember forever, but I won't be able to share it online because there was nothing, I didn't record any of it, a couple of photos, but no video. But it was just that to me was a big part of the reason why I took on this challenge and this trip, because those experiences that you can't plan for or you don't know that are going to happen, but when they do happen, you're like, oh my God, this was such a great experience. So, that happened. And then playing in Šibenik as well on the court there for Dražen. And then in Dubrovnik, I know you've probably been to Dubrovnik and seen that court there that's overlooking the Adriatic Sea.
Yeah, I've never actually been to Dubrovnik, but I had a chance to see that court on the social medias and it's really remarkable one. Yeah. But yeah. I would like to say something to you about the Dražen Petrović Museum and everything that you actually had a chance to see there. I've been there like maybe 7 or 8 years ago, and it was my first time there, and it's really special place when we talk about the energy that you can feel entering in that museum and in the arena also. But the museum is very very, very special place. So you should make a story, an official story about it, and to bring your camera and to record everything that you can there. I would like to enjoy you.
Well, I did get some other footage of around, like I visited his tomb there at the graveyard there in Zagreb, and I got some footage there. And in Šibenik, I visited his first home as well, so I got some footage of that. So I am actually trying to put something together. It's been a little bit difficult trying to do all the sort of recovery work from the first trip, and then planning for the second one, and then trying to build it all together. But I am working on it, so hopefully it will be. I'll have it ready for you soon, because yeah, Dražen for me, and I sometimes think, because when I grew up in the NBA, there were virtually no non-US born players in the league. Yeah. Maybe a couple. I mean, Sabonis was one of the first ones, but he didn't really play until later in his career. And so maybe I felt a bit of a connection there with Dražen, because I was born in Australia and I dreamed of making the NBA. So to see someone from not the United States make it in the NBA and be really successful like he was for a couple of years there, maybe that's how I felt a bit more of a connection to Dražen. But the other thing in Šibenik, I was at that court just shooting around, and a lady who used to, I can't remember her name, unfortunately I forgot it, but she's a well-known lady in Croatia, and she knew Dražen as a little kid, and said how he used to be at the gym at like 6 o'clock in the morning, working on his shooting and dribbling and passing and doing everything. So, when he made it to the NBA, it wasn't like, well, we'll just take a try on this guy. He was ready to play. He had proven already to be such a great player. And so, I mean, it's obviously a tragic end to his story there, but it was such an inspiring story that he even got to the NBA in the first place.
Yeah. Regarding that topic about the European or non-American players in the NBA, when I was young, we knew about Vlade Divac, Peja Stojakovic, we spoke about Dražen and guys like those, but Sabonis also. But nowadays I feel like the impact of those players are pretty big, and probably are stronger than back in the history. How do you feel about that? What do you think about those kind of players that you mentioned? Luka Doncic, we have Nikola Jokic here, and everybody else. What about that? How much do you think that the NBA game actually adapted to those players?
Well, I definitely think it is now a lot more so, and we're starting to really recognize that. If you look at guys like the ones you mentioned, Divac and Stojakovic and Jokic and Doncic, they're not guys who are like the biggest, muscliest guys. They're more like just really smart, selfless teammates who know how to make the right pass. They know, because if you look at the numbers that Jokic puts up, for example, like he's historically breaking all sorts of numbers for a center, because he passes so well. It always feels to me like Jokic he could easily score 35 points a night, but he's more interested in trying to win and share the ball and be a great teammate and be a great basketball player rather than a great athlete. And I think you're starting to see that now, that people just understand, okay, you can dominate without having to score all the points. You can dominate by doing so many other things. And also the versatility of his game, because I mean, Stojakovic was probably the best shooter that I can think of from that region, but Vlade was a good shooter. He was a good passer as well. He was a smart guy. And so players are starting to understand the basketball IQ that comes out of that region, is just as important as being like the best athlete you can be. I think there's a funny quote that it was at maybe the Olympics or the World Championships, when someone said, Vlade is taking it so seriously, he's decided to stop smoking for this tournament, which was, that was the crazy thing. It's like when Vlade first joined the Lakers, I know from people, I spoke to James Worthy one time, who was his teammate. He said after the game, Vlade would just be in the locker room, just like smoking.
Yeah.
So, to me, that again just shows that you can be such an impactful basketball player without necessarily being the best athlete on the court, and that understanding of how to play the game is more important than being like the strongest, the fastest, you can jump the highest. And so I think now teams are really understanding how important that is, and again, it's being reflected in the awards. So many awards are won by non-US born players now, that it's great for the game. Basketball is a global game. and it's for men and for women. I mean, the WNBA is really, really big right now as well. And that's what I love about it, is that it's for boys and girls, and everyone can play and get the recognition as well. I mean, it's been a long time coming, but I think we're starting to see that. But also, when you think of European players, sometimes people sort of like, well, we don't know how that player is going to work out. They don't all work out, but then American players don't all work out either. So, but Luka and Nikola are showing. I mean, Nikola was second round pick. I think 37 he was, and it was like, now it's like he might win 3 MVPs in a row.
Yeah, and he started to play basketball with 16 years old.
Yeah, it's like, that's crazy. I mean, some kids over here are playing from as soon as they can walk. They're learning to dribble and shoot, and they go through all the academies. Jokic rides his horses, or his, and then it's like, oh, I might just try playing basketball, and he becomes one of the best ones that's ever played.
Yeah. And what about the media image that those guys had? Actually, is there anything different comparing to the American players, or do you see it as a different? Because everyone here we had that impression that American media is are always speaking about the Jokic, he's not interested in being in media actually, or he doesn't want to be that superstar as he is actually. So how do you feel about that? How do you see Nikola Jokic in those terms, in medias? And not only him, maybe Luka Doncic is more interesting for those kinds of medias, but we here, we want to, to see what's your experience about that, to share it with you.
Well, a couple of weeks ago, Luka had that big game where he scored 60 points and they came back from 9 down against the Knicks. And his first thing he said to Jeff Skin Wade was like, I need a beer, and that to me sort of sums up a little bit more about the Balkan way of life, where it's like they love basketball. They love being, competing and playing hard. But at the end of the day, it's also like we can have a beer as well and enjoy it. Like we don't have to, sacrifice our entire diet and never have any little indulgences like that. And again, I think when you look at Nikola Jokic, if you were to compare him to someone like, Kawhi Leonard or LeBron James, these guys are like just incredibly, there's not a pound of fat on them or anything like that. Whereas Jokic, I don't know if he's ever done a bench press in his life or lifted any barbells or anything, because he doesn't look like that. But it doesn't take away from his game, because he's just such a good player. And then when he does get interviewed, there was actually a really, really good interview last year in the playoffs when someone said, what was the atmosphere like? And he said, brother, I played in Serbia, so I know what it's like. And having now been to Belgrade, it makes more sense to me now. I'm like, playing in Belgrade where, they're just, the noise is nonstop, versus playing an NBA game. Again, a playoff game in the NBA can be very, very intense, but it's not quite the same where where people are just hooting and hollering for the entire game. So I think that's the thing is that for me, Jokic and Doncic, they never feel like they want to be superstars and they want to be Hollywood stars. They just love playing basketball and they're trying their best. But at the end of the day, they're kind of normal guys too. They're just regular dudes. I know some people from the Denver Nuggets went to Serbia, or they were in Europe for the Euros this year, and they spoke to Jokic, and it was not like, he's got a big entourage around him. They just saw him and they were like, oh, hey. And he was like, hey, how you doing, guys? And it was like, this is one of the greatest players. He's the MVP. He's about to play for his country, but he's also just like, yeah, hey, how are you guys? So that to me is a real, that's a really strong personality trait that he has. And again, I think it's not just for Serbians. I think it's that entire region where people are very, very genuine and very hospitable. Yes. Yes.
So speaking about those European players and the impact they had on the league, how can you see and how can you describe that impact in some media way and in making the image about it, and also that post from Luka Doncic that we had, that he is watching the EuroLeague like every other week, especially games of Crvena Zvezda, because he's a big fan of Zvezda here. How do you see that? And do you have enough time as Luka to watch the EuroLeague also? He was also speaking about that on the press conference, and he told that it's easier to score in the EuroLeague, and that, yes, he's watching more EuroLeague than the NBA games.
Yeah, well, again, I think when you are brought up in that area where the games are so meaningful, it's hard to, just avoid it. Like, you can't just sort of forget where he came from and now start playing the NBA. And I think also the timing works pretty well too. So most of the time the EuroLeague games are on during the afternoon wherever he is in the United States, so he has a little bit of time there. But I also think that when you look at EuroLeague now, there are so many players who have played in the NBA at some point and have gone then either back to EuroLeague and played. And you know, there's always that, you know, guys come over like with a bit of hype and a bit of reputation, but the game is really different in America, and some guys just can't adapt, but then they go back to Europe and they can be very good. I know Teodosic, for example, is another guy. I loved watching him play, but when he came over to Los Angeles, at that stage of his career, it's very hard to sort of adapt to a completely different style of game because he needed more time, he needed more possession with the ball in his hands, I think, to be effective. But when he wasn't able to do that, then you're like, well, why was this guy so hyped up when we don't really get to see him play many minutes in America? So it just sort of, it's hard. But when you come into the league drafted like Jokic and Doncic, you have more of a chance to really put your imprint onto the league rather than coming over when you're a little bit older. But it to me, when I think about anyone who's come from Europe, like if you think of the Gasol brothers, Manu Ginobili, I know he's technically South American, but he came from Europe. Those guys are all really creative with the ball. They know how to pass. They know how to move. And I learned from my experience playing in Europe there. Where I play in America, it's often a lot of one-on-one stuff. It's like the ball doesn't move around very much. When I started playing, especially the first game in Ljubljana there, it was all 3-on-3. Well, they said we only play 3-on-3.
Yeah.
And the ball just moves around. And I, you know, like I'm out there thinking, I've organized these games, I've talked about, I'm coming to play. And all of a sudden I'm like, I'm getting absolutely cooked here on defense because my man is just moving around. That just doesn't really happen at pickup basketball in America. People don't move all that much. It's like one guy comes down and tries a shot, maybe one pass. But in Europe, it's like this ball is like you've got to have the head on a swivel because otherwise you're going to be embarrassed on the defensive end. But then on the offensive end, what is really good, especially with 3-on-3, is you're always pretty much involved in almost every play. If you play 5-on-5 full court, you might go 10 possessions without even really touching the ball. Yeah. So when it's a bit more, you know, fewer players and more movement, then the game just keeps on flowing a little bit better. So that's what I think. And again, I think when you look at the passing skills that the European players have, people are understanding how you need to be able to pass the ball. It can basically break down any defense as long as you pass the ball. So one-on-one stuff, there are some players like LeBron can pretty much beat any player one-on-one, but he's the exception. Most of the time, if you move the ball around, and Greg Popovich is a good example of a coach who, you know, in those Spurs years, because I think his heritage is actually Serbian, I believe, a few generations back there, you know, so he understood how important it is to like move the ball and to get players up. You don't, you know, Boris Diaw was never a great athlete, but he was a very good player in that Spurs system because he just knew how to be utilized to his best. And so that's the thing. I mean, you know, Luka's averaging basically a triple-double, you know, very close to it. Jokic is close to it as well. Just completely changing the way that they play the game because their focus really is all about winning rather than, hey, I want to score 35 points a night.
Yeah, of course. And I heard you and your conversation with Sasha Doncic, with the father of Luka Doncic, and he was also speaking about the you know, that kind of a connection in this region, not only about basketball but every other sports actually. So from winter sport or handball to soccer games and things like that. Did you find anything different between that kind of a passion that we have for sport here? I mean, we already mentioned we have a relation to sport like, you know, it's life or death tomorrow after the game or something. But it's not the case in Australia or in America or in the other part of the world, probably. How do you see it? Is it? I mean, I need to ask like this, is it healthy to have that relation to sports?
Yes. Well, I think we only have to look at what happened last week with Novak Djokovic winning the Australian Open. I think, you know, he's pretty much now, he's certainly going to finish with the most Grand Slams of all time. And you only have to look at him like Novak is an emotional player. You know, I love watching him play, and he loves to sort of get into it with the crowd as well, like throughout his whole career, you know, especially in his younger days. there was often times where like he was, screaming at the fans and they were screaming at him, but it sort of brings out the best in him as well. I know Anna Ivanovic as well, another famous tennis player, maybe not quite as emotional in that same sense as Novak, but, very, very passionate about her game and the way she played. And so, and if you're going back to Novak, I mean, if you look at who his coach is right now, Goran Ivanisevic, who is actually my favorite tennis player of all time.
Really?
I used to love Goran. I mean, that Wimbledon that he won in 2001, still the greatest tennis tournament I think that has ever been won, because he was.
I think you actually have that special bond with Adriatic Sea and those kind of places there in Croatia. Yes, Split, Dubrovnik. Yeah.
I think it's not a coincidence, because Ivanisevic, for me, he was a Wimbledon finalist 3 times. And he didn't win it. And then the time that he made it finally, and he wasn't supposed to win, and he did. And the interview he gave after the game was just like, I was in tears after the game, because he actually talks about Dražen as well there, and how he said, like the tennis racket felt like it was 50 pounds. And in the very final game against Pat Rafter, he double faults 3 times in that final game. And it's like, oh my God, even when you're watching it, now, 20 years after it happened, I'm just like, oh, he's going to lose it. He's going to lose it, but he doesn't. So, but anyway, the reason I bring him up is he is the coach right now of Novak. And so, again, having a Croatian and a Serbian working together, I think that just is so great to build relationships in that area too. So, and Goran, I mean, he broke more tennis rackets than anybody has ever broken in their life, because he was always like, angry at himself there. So I think there is certainly that passion there and that emotion in the water there, in the blood of the people from that region. So, it's great to see people when they really care about what they're doing. And sometimes it upsets people. Fine, whatever. Everyone's upset with somebody these days over something. But I think ultimately, when it's meaningful to somebody, you support that. And that's why I look at Nikola Jokic, for example. He's won 2 MVPs. He doesn't really care because he wants the championship. He wants the team prize. He's happy. He's proud. But to him, it's nowhere near as meaningful as if he can bring a championship to the Denver Nuggets or a EuroLeague championship or a world championship to Serbia, because that team award is ultimately what he's about, rather than, hey, look at me, I'm a great player type of situation.
Considering the fact how much Serbian athletes you actually watch and covered all the time, I guess you know how to curse in Serbian, right? Not only Serbian, Croatian also, it's the same thing.
I don't know, but you know what is funny, and you may have seen it on my Instagram when I was on my way to Slovenia. I went through Frankfurt in Germany. I had an unexpected layover, and I was playing basketball, and I was just shooting around, and this girl turns up, and she just says, "Hey, you want to play basketball?" And I was like, "Oh, sure." And then all of a sudden, this girl starts doing all these tricks, shooting from behind the backboard. Like, she did the splits and put a shot in. She started shooting from Steph Curry range. When I was shooting, she's like, no, like just completely different. Turns out she's from Serbia. So I think that's probably something, the connection there. That's no coincidence that the Serbian girl turned up and just started like trashing my game and then showing me up. But she was really, really fun to play with, Maria. I had a great time with her. And when I told her, I said, oh, well, I'm going to Belgrade if you want to come down there and play. And she's like, oh, I'm from Serbia. I'm like, oh, okay, great.
Yeah, we are all over the world, actually.
Yeah.
So what was the most interesting thing that you learned, maybe the new thing that you learned, not only about basketball, but also about the other things during your trips and everything that happened to you, not only in Europe, maybe on some other parts of the world?
As I said earlier, like traveling for me is just like such an education, because you always go and discover something about a place that you've never been to before. So I think for me, again, when I decided to leave my career, that was a stable career, I was, paid well and was talking about basketball, to try something else, there's like, what happens if nobody shows up to these games? What happens if people who just say, hey, I'm going to come out and play, and they don't turn up? And then I'm like, oh, okay, so I guess I don't have a job and I don't have anything new. So I had that fear that this, might backfire and blow up in my face. But the fact that it didn't happen and the fact that people did show up. Now, they didn't show up everywhere. Like in Šibenik, I added a game late and I got the date confused with some people. And even in Dubrovnik, not a lot of people turned up, but I was given more confidence especially when I got there to Belgrade, because I was like, oh my God, there was like 15 people turned up and played. And then again, we had a beer and people told me stories. One guy told me how playing the piano helped him play basketball, and it was a fascinating story. Another guy brought bananas. I like to eat bananas. A guy brought bananas for me. Guys brought rakia along, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to be drunk. And,
That's how we play basketball here.
I know. So I think that's what it was for me. It was like, when you take on a challenge in life, you fear that, like, well, I'm going to be a complete failure and this is going to be a complete bust. And ultimately it wasn't. It was the opposite. And I left really motivated and inspired that I can turn this into something. Again, the same thing happened in Athens, in Greece. I had 2 games against locals there. And then I just have so many people saying, you've got to come back. You've got to come back. Because I want to actually go to other places apart from Belgrade and things like that. And so I want to go to Novi Sad and Sombor and play there, because people were saying, you got to come up here. You got to come up here. And I was like, well, I can't do everything, but hopefully if I am able to continue this on, I will be able to make return trips and visit other parts as well, because then I do get to indulge my 2 passions of basketball and traveling and just having great experiences. So I think to answer your question, the fact that I was able to do it and have people turn up was really, really enjoyable.
Yes, but for me, it's it still sounds very unpredictable. What are you going to do when you come there? Actually, who are you going to see, or which kind of conversation you are going to record, or something like that. And I saw one story from Belgrade exactly about the guy who is going to a medical school. Yeah, and he's playing basketball in his free time, and things like normal things, like random people, and they have also their daily lives and things like that. And you were starting to record that kind of people. So it was very interesting for me to see all those normal people around me who are playing basketball every day here, actually. And it's really nice from somebody who is trying to make the story about him. But what was the most, let's say, interesting thing, but also what was the biggest cultural shock for you in Africa? How was that?
Well, so I mean, like, I haven't obviously been to Africa yet, but that to me is going to be how when I get there, like, to see how kids relate to, just because when I'm there, I'm going to be doing clinics with kids as well and trying to contribute like some basketball jerseys and maybe basketballs and things like that to give people, so that it's not just like an ego trip for me of like, hey, watch me play basketball. That to me is not very exciting. But as you mentioned, it's like meeting the people and listening to their stories and having them explain to me what they do. Like the person you're referring to, Rastko, he's a 23-year-old gynecologist who plays in a band. And I was just like, okay, I just didn't expect to hear that as a career choice for a 23-year-old. I mean, I guess it has to start somewhere, but so there was so many other people like that who had these fascinating stories that I was like, okay, I now, and I'm trying to plan those before I go to Africa so that I can have those conversations ready to go and put them up and just hear, because so many people have fascinating stories about how their life is the way it is and where they came from, and so when you're able to capture that and put it up, people can then relate to it. Like, I had a guy in Athens whose Albanian grandmother, he told his Albanian grandmother he was coming to play with me. And so she cooked me a local Albanian cheese dish. And I was like, wow, this is incredible. So I ate it and it was great. And he was also one, I don't think he had raki. He had something else on the side, this big bottle. And he was like, let's drink it. And I'm like, well, I can't drink all of it right now, but we had a couple of glasses of it. So that's what I'm ultimately hoping, that the whole feature will be a series that you can watch, whether you're an old person or a younger person, boy or girl, and enjoy the story of traveling and meeting people and listening to stories, all centered around basketball and how the game brings us together. Because, we all, well, not all, but if you're a basketball fan, you love basketball, and if you can experience it from so many different angles, then there's so many different stories to tell, and that I think is a part of the appeal for me. Like on the trip that I've gone on, I don't want to play indoor courts, because indoor courts are beautiful, sure, but the outdoor court just creates that thing, like in Dubrovnik or in Belgrade there, where it's like, people have said to me, man, that looks awesome playing in that fortress. And I said, it was so cool. That fortress was built 300 years BC, so that fortress has been standing for like nearly 3,000 years. And I just turned up and played some basketball in it. So that, to me, is a cool experience. You try to imagine what it must have been like, and you can't really imagine, but being there and seeing the old castles and things like that, it at least gives you a little bit of an understanding of the context of the history of the country and the city that you're in.
Yeah. So just to be clear for everybody there listening to us, how much people do you have? Any other like team behind you that is working for you, or you're totally alone in this? And I guess that you are not doing only this part in front of the camera. You also have that post-productional things to do a lot when you came back from the trip.
Yes, that's the part of it that is a bit difficult, because I am doing literally all of it myself. I'm trying to organize the trips, plan the games, organize the content, then edit it and produce it myself. And it's so time consuming to try to, you know what it's like when you're editing. I mean, you sometimes you put something together and you're like, well, this is a piece of crap. No one's going to watch this, It's very frustrating, it's a long process like that. So I am trying to sort of outsource some of my work to some people who can help me. But of course, then you've got to pay for all that. And so I'm all self-funded right now. So I've got to be a little bit careful with just how I sort of allocate my funds. But it's all a learning process too. That's how it is for me. It's like, well, I can try to make things happen here by myself. If I'm able to be successful in doing what I'm doing, then I will be able to get people to come on board and support the project financially or resourcefully. But at the start, it's like a startup. You kind of have to do all the heavy lifting, and you start in a bit of a hole and you try to dig your way out of it. And having great experiences and having people interested in the project is helping. And doing podcasts from different parts of the world is so much fun as well for me. So that maybe there's someone in Serbia who can come on this trip with me as well, and help shoot it and help produce it and stuff.
I was about to tell you that it reminds me on somebody, but it was me actually.
Right. Yeah.
Now when we are finishing this, and I'm gonna do the subtitle thing and everything after that. But I have a few guys here from the company, from the sport club, that are helping me. So yeah, I'm pretty honored to have them. But yes, one of the reasons actually why I wanted to speak with you was because I started this podcast like last year, and I was doing about, I don't know, 20 episodes of maybe more. And after that, actually something happened in that formal thing with contract with the studio that I had and everything, and that relation broke actually. So now I don't have a real studio. I have some kind of studios here in Sport Club, but I'm about to handle everything and to, let's say, start the other part of the podcast or the second season, or however you can call it. So yeah, you were very actually motivational for me, because I saw those YouTube links and everything that you used to work back in the history. And I was like, okay, he's doing it probably by himself, everything after the recording. And if he can do that, I can do that too. So yeah, if Li Elis do that, I can do that too.
Yeah. Well, if you can convince your bosses to come to Africa and maybe help produce and shoot that, then you're more than welcome to come.
Yeah. But about that part of the story also, yeah, you had a great job, probably great salary. You did a job that you loved the most, probably. And you were watching basketball, speak about basketball all the time, recording very funny videos with the other part of the group, people who also loves basketball a lot. And I remember I don't know if it's Vašington Post or somebody else, but I remember the headline about you. It was like an NBA podcaster quit his job to play pickup hoops around the world. And when you read it, you're like, oh my God, this guy is crazy, really. And it sounds like you didn't have the plan B. It was your plan A, and it was everything that you had to, to play pickup hoops all around the world. And how do you feel about it? Did you ever think about that actually on that way, or you just, you was just, I want to do this, and that's it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I didn't think about it just overnight. It was something that built up over probably, a few months. And then I just realized as well that, like, if you wait for the timing to be right for things, you just wouldn't do anything, because I originally tried to pitch it around, but it was just an idea. And so I knew that in order to maybe attract someone else to come on board, I would have to go out and just start doing it myself anyway, and seeing if that would be appealing to a service or a production house to come along. So it was a gamble in that sense, but there was a bigger gamble for me in not trying it, because and I did have a good job and I enjoyed what I was doing, but I had been doing it for a long time, where I was like, I wanted to do something different. And in order to do something different, you really do have to, like, make a change. You can't just do a little change here and expect a big result. You have to be like, well, you know what? If I'm going to do it, boom, I'm going to go for it. And already I can say that the experiences I've had have been worth it, because if I didn't do it, I wouldn't have been in Belgrade for the derby. I wouldn't have seen the court in Dubrovnik, and I wouldn't have met Luka's father and Dražen's mother and things like that. So, right now, while financially, obviously it's a little different because I'm not getting paid, but I'm hoping that this will pay off in the long run, in that sense, that I will get paid. And so, like anything, like it's like an NBA player. I mean, in their first season, you don't expect them to be MVP and the best player. You expect it 5-10 years down the road, because it takes time. And that's where I am right now. I've really only been doing this now for like 4 months. So that's not a very long time to judge anything. It's good. Like, if in 2 years' time I'm still trying to convince someone and it's not really growing on social media, then by then it'll be like, okay, it didn't work. But I'm not just going to be, it's not a quick hitter like that. It's like, I'm trying to give this at least 18 months to hopefully build up something and get more interest. And at that point, then I'll know. And if it doesn't work, it's like, well, okay, I can do something else with my life. But at least I know, because like I say, the worst thing for me would have been staying in the same job and then 2 or 3 years down the line saying, why didn't you try that? You should have tried it. You never know what could have happened. And so that's where I am right now. And, again, hopefully through EuroLeague, I might be able to do some more work with them, and just being available to listen to other offers and listen to other opportunities, I think, is what's really appealing to me. But also taking control of your own content, where you're like, okay, I'm going to do this now. Doesn't always work out, and it's hard and it's time consuming, but it's really fun to be like, well, this is all me. And that's what I like about it. So, I'm excited for what lies ahead, even though I don't even know really what that is. But that, to me, that opportunity of what might happen is something that I really, really enjoy.
Yeah, how everything started actually between you and basketball. I guess it was in your childhood, and it has very big impact on you, obviously. But how everything happened?
Yeah, so I'm the third of 3 boys in my family. And so my brothers both played basketball. My dad played basketball. Mum played netball, which is a big sport in Commonwealth countries. I'm not sure if they play in Serbia or not, but so my whole family was very, very sporty. So as young as I can remember, I used to go to the basketball stadium and watch Dad and watch my brothers. And so I just started playing. And then as I grew up in the late 80s and early 90s, when the Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan really started being the biggest sport in the world, the biggest game in the world, the biggest, most famous athlete, it really took off for me. And so I always wanted to get to the NBA and to America. But when you grow up in Australia in the 80s and 90s, you can't just jump on a plane and say, I'm going to America I tried to be an exchange student when I was about 15. And I was like, just send me to Chicago or Los Angeles. And they were like, well, you can't just go and watch basketball. You have to go to school. And I'm like, I just want to go and watch the NBA. But they wouldn't let me do it. But then as I grew up and I got into my late teens and 20s, I decided to start traveling. And I first went to London. My mother was born in London, actually. So I have sort of family there. And then I decided I wanted to get to America. It was hard to get into America to get a work visa, but Canada was okay. So I could get to Canada, and that's where the Raptors are, the Toronto Raptors. So then I was able to I'm actually now able to watch the NBA and be close to it. And then I tried a few different things with my career, and I managed to start interning at a sports TV network. And then the podcast came along, and then NBA TV grabbed us from there. So, what I'm doing now is not really different to what I've done in the past, as far as take a few chances, try something different, and see how it goes. But it was nothing's ever been just like from one day to the next. It's a long, long process that I know you just have to sort of stick at it. So, I didn't leave my job because I didn't like the NBA anymore. It was just more like I wanted to do something else with basketball, and now I get to play and travel. So, it's pretty exciting, really.
Yeah, it is. And what happened with the NBA TV production and everything? How everything started? Actually, I guess that was the first big thing for you in your career. And what was your first meeting with medias, and that part of the world, the television world?
It was crazy because we were doing a podcast in Toronto just over 10 years ago, and podcasts back then still didn't really exist. People didn't really know what a podcast was, but NBA TV here in Atlanta, they wanted some content for their TV channel. And so they recruited us to go down there, and it was like, oh my God, going to NBA TV, this is wild. And it was a big change because we're on a podcast right now where you can sort of say whatever you want. Doesn't really matter. You can edit and do it. But when you're on TV, you've got to be a bit more like, well, yourself. You have to be more professional.
It's more formal, actually, somebody's listening to that, not only your mom or something, but somebody's listening to that.
Yeah, exactly. And so it was a really big change for us to try to do that. The first year on NBA TV, I came home to my wife and I said, I'm going to get fired. They're going to fire me. I said dumb stuff today. I don't know what I was doing. But, it's one of those things. If you give up, then you're never going to improve. So just kept trying to work on it, tried harder, learned from experiences, and slowly we got better. And we did it for 6 years in the end, which is a long time for a TV show. But then after one season, it was after 2019, they just said they're not renewing the contract. And that was disappointing because TV is cool. It's great to be on TV. But at the same time, pretty much everybody I know in any media industry has been fired, made redundant, laid off, whatever. So you have to just respond, and you say, okay, well, that was a great experience. What's the next experience going to be? And then you keep on, working at it. And that's where I think as well, I'm more confident now in myself, knowing that, I've worked for companies where it felt like things were going really well, and they still don't renew your contract anyway. So now I take that out of someone else's hands, and I'm like, this is all on me. So if it fails, it's all on me. If it succeeds, it's on me as well. And it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be smooth. But if you believe in what you're doing, then I think you're more likely to have success. So that's where I am right now. I think I've got an idea. I think I've got a good plan that is interesting to somebody, but I've still got to convince them to come on board with it and support it. So. But it's fun learning. I love learning. And I think again, that's why I love traveling, because, I've traveled a lot and I've been to a lot of countries around the world, but there's no place that I would be like, oh, I don't want to go there. I would go any country in the world to experience it. And then the best is when someone says, you go to a country and then you get to go back to it. Like I did just recently when they said, do you want to go back to Belgrade? Yes. I said, it's going to be cold. It's going to be raining. I don't care. I'll go back, I'll go back and just have that other experience. And it was amazing.
Yeah, that was the case with me and Istanbul. And now I have really special bond with Istanbul. You will see when you go there. I was in Istanbul in October, and then again in November last year. And everyone here from the company was like, oh my God, you're going to Istanbul again. Really? Why do you do that? But it was another hall, another arena, another team, totally different game, totally different people around the club, different kind of organization. And for me, which was the most important thing for me in that moment was I had a chance to see the EuroLeague game, but women EuroLeague game of Fenerbahce actually. And the head coach of the team is a national head coach of Serbia, actually, Marina Maljković. So, and I know a few girls from the team also, and I had a chance to see all of them after a long time, but in a different city, in different country, and it was a huge experience for me. And I was like, yes, I'm gonna go to Istanbul like 5 times in a year, if I need to go. So everything was very perfect for me. I totally understand what you're speaking about that special bond, but what about the starters, actually? It was a thing that lasts for, I don't know, if like more than 10 years, probably, right? Like 12 years.
Well, the starters itself was only the NBA TV years of 6 years, but the guys who were part of that show who I worked with, they started like 17 years ago doing the podcast in Toronto. So it's been called different things throughout the years, but the original Skeets, Tass, and JD, they started in 2006, which is like, I mean, that's just forever ago now. So yeah, they've been doing it, and that they still do that now. The podcast is still very good, very successful. So they've continued on, and that's great that they've been able to sustain it for that long, because many things don't last that long, and the fact they've been able to adapt and adjust over the years is really, really a credit to them, and the fact they've still got an audience too, and the audience continues to grow. So that to me really did change the sports media landscape in so many ways, because again, they were one of the first to have a regular podcast that was kind of not maybe daily at the start. It became daily, but they started doing it and they weren't sure of where it was going and they were going to quit. But then people emailed them and sent them messages and they sort of kept going. So it took them, when I talk about what I'm doing now, it took them basically 4 years before they started making any money from doing what they were doing. So that's good in some ways and kind of depressing in others, because I'm like, I hope I'm not waiting 4 years to get any money from it. But it just shows that, again, if you think long term and big picture, things can happen, but you have to keep working at them and being patient and keep trying. And that's I'm at that stage right now where I'm like, it's very small, but I hopefully will be bigger down the road. But I one thing about your travels I love, Alex, is the captions you put on Instagram. I mean, they're just incredible. I got to know who wrote some of those. I mean, they're amazing.
I can give you some extra advices. Yeah, it's always
please.
Yeah.
Please. My favorite one was the romance in Rome. I thought, that's just,
Yeah. We mentioned a couple of times during the interview, we mentioned women's sport and women's basketball. You were speaking about the WNBA. I told you about the Women EuroLeague. I see your shirt, if I'm not mistaken, Bet on Women. Yeah. So what about that? How much space do you give to women? We know about, we already mentioned the girl from the video. So how much space do you give to women basketball at all, to women in general? And what do you think about that? It's always a topic about that difference between women and men basketball. Are we finally equal to each other, or we can still, do more about that?
Oh, we can always do more. And I think, I grew up, my mother was a very strong woman, very, very strong woman. And her mother, my grandmother, was also very, very strong, just women who were independent and they weren't the sort of women who would stay at home and just like be subservient to men. Mum was very strong. She was very smart. She was very good at sport. She passed away, sadly, a few years ago, 20 years ago now, but she left a very strong impression on me about just how women are strong, if not stronger than men in so many ways. And then on my father's side, his mother, my grandmother there, she was also very, very strong. So like some of the most impactful people in my life in my early years were women, people that I looked up to and people that I admired. I had very, very good relationships with all, those women in my life, even though I didn't have any sisters. And so when I now look at how the world is, women are incredibly good at any sport. And some of the best athletes, like, again, going to tennis, you look at Serena Williams and going back earlier, Steffi Graf and Martina Hingis, like these women were incredibly fun to watch as well. So women's sport is still, sort of in terms of its broadcast and its publicity, a level below men's, but it shouldn't be. And I think we are starting to make progress especially in basketball. The WNBA has become really big. And one of the best WNBA players is Lauren Jackson from Australia, who she's retired now, but she was a 2-time MVP. She won a couple of championships as well. And so that's what I love. And that's what I'm trying to do with my my career now is like, hey, this is not just for men. This is not just, hey, men, let's watch another man play basketball. I want this to be about women and girls and everybody coming together and playing because, okay, women may not be able to dunk quite like LeBron James now. I mean, some women can, but not quite in the same sense. But the way that they shoot and the way the ball moves and the way the game is played, to me, it's at the same level of how men play. It's just teamwork, it's sacrifice, it's being there for each other. So there's always going to be that difference of like, you know, you won't, I don't think, see someone who's 6'8" like LeBron and dunk like him, but that's more just a physical thing rather than an inability to play the game or to entertain or to be good at it. So I think that's something that's very important to me, that that women feel welcome to come out and play and to be a part of what I'm doing. And the clinics that I'm doing, I've had a lot of NBA teams who I've contacted and I've asked for merchandise like T-shirts and jerseys. And I've said to them, please send some WNBA stuff too, because there's going to be girls there. There's going to be female, and not that they only have to have WNBA stuff, but I wanted to make sure that we are getting the message out there that, you know, we need to celebrate women in all facets, but especially in the sporting world where the gap for so long has been so big. So, you know, and I look at my wife now, Roxana. I mean, she's one of the most strongest people I've ever met in my life. She's an incredible mother, a fantastic wife. She was born and raised in Peru. And so, again, I think it's no coincidence. Like my doctor's a female, my dentist is a female, my therapist is a female, you know, my wife, all the strongest people in my life tend to be females. And so that's where I always feel that I started off life in a very strong light there, because the women around me were like very, very strong people. And so I think I've carried that through my entire life.
Yeah, so Lee, we were speaking about the Lauren Jackson and about the women basketball in general. I had a chance to watch her in Sydney in Women World Cup last year in October. And it was a very historical moment for her. And it was very nice for me to see, you know, standing ovations for one, I'm not going to say girl, but for one strong woman as Lauren is. What about you and your connection of actually with her? I had like very short time with her in mixed zone after one game on that World Cup, but what about you?
Yeah, so she is an inspiring athlete from Australia, you know, taken by the Seattle Storm, I think #1 pick when she was drafted. And I remember watching her play in the Australian League when she was growing up, and she had that potential. Her mum and dad, actually, her mum especially, was a very good athlete. And a few years ago, last time I was in Australia, 2019, I got a chance to meet her and her mum. And it was great. It was only short. It was only, you know, probably 5 or 10 minutes, but it was so cool to meet somebody who had succeeded so well on the international floor from an Australian, because we've had other players play in the NBA, but no one's been an MVP like Lauren was, a champion. And you know, people say she's one of the greatest ever in the WNBA. And I think she's proven that. So it was really, really cool. And then for her to come out of retirement to play in Australia for the World Cup last year, incredible moment, because she's a mother now. She has a couple of kids and she's had some injuries she had to deal with. So at her age, all those factors, she had to sort of get herself back into shape, back out on the court. And she did really well. So just, again, another sort of inspiring story from a person who had achieved so much. She didn't need to come back, but she just wanted to, and she wanted to show that she was still able to do it. And that was great. So I'm very happy to see how successful she was. And then again, she's able to adapt as a different person, as a mother. And, you know, she's very, very well loved within Australia, very popular. And she's just you know, again, I can't really say that I know her, because obviously I don't, but she seems like a very, very nice, genuine person who at the end of the day is a great athlete, but she doesn't have an entourage. She doesn't have a big sort of, she's not difficult to get access to, like she does interviews and she does things like that. And I think that's great.
Yeah. Can you choose some of your interviews and maybe post-game or pre-game interviews with big names, you know, not only in men basketball, but also in women? And can you choose a few of them who was the most interesting for you, you know?
Yeah, well, Samantha Stosur is a tennis player from Australia who won the US Open in 2010, I think it was. I can't quite remember the year, but I got to interview her in Toronto for a tennis tournament where she was there. And it was funny because she was in Toronto, so she was expecting the interviewer to be Canadian. And it was a guy from a different part of Australia. And so she, like, when I started interviewing her, I could sort of tell she was looking at me. She's like, you sound Australian, but she didn't know who I was. And so afterwards, she's like, you're from Australia? I say, yeah, I'm from Melbourne. And she's like, oh my God. Like, so we started talking. So that was really, really fun. But on the men's basketball side, I mean, Stephen Curry for me is probably the best interview, most fun interview I had, because I actually got to play basketball and shoot around with Steph, which was like just amazing. That was about 5 years ago, I think now. So getting to shoot around with like the greatest shooter in basketball history is amazing. It's an amazing experience. And that's one of those ones where if I had told people 10 years ago, said, hey, I'm going to shoot around with Steph Curry in a private shooting, people would say, you're crazy. Yeah. So when people say I'm crazy for doing what I'm doing now, I'm like, well, you know what though? There's crazier stuff's happened that I can't explain. One of those being, I got to play with Steph, and I've interviewed Dirk Nowitzki and Isaiah Thomas and Vince Carter and players like that. Like if I told the 11-year-old kid who grew up loving basketball in Australia, like in the late 80s, I said, one day you're going to be playing basketball with Steph Curry and one day you're going to shoot around with Isaiah Thomas, people would have said, okay, this kid's living in a dream world, like he doesn't deal in reality. So that's why I feel some people have said to me, like, explain to me what you're doing. It doesn't sound like it sounds crazy. And I'm like, well, it might sound crazy to you, but inside of me, so many other crazy things have happened in life that this could happen too. This might work. This might pay off in the long run. And so that's why I don't feel that it is that crazy, because it's like you just don't know what could happen when you try things. If you try, if you go to these countries, you go to these places, again, like meeting Biserka Petrovic there. I didn't know until I walked through that door that I was going to meet her that day and have this incredible experience. And it would not have happened. It could not have happened if I didn't make that change in my life in the other part of it. So that to me, it just helps inspire me to keep trying things and to keep trying to do more and more things with my career. And, again, like I've shot around with Vince Carter and I hit a 3-pointer and Vince was like, oh man, nice shot. And I'm like, Vince Carter, one of the greatest players of all time, just said, nice shot. And so I've had so many experiences like that in life where I come away from, I interviewed Kobe Bryant one time, and that was funny because I was an intern at the time, and I was asked to cover the Lakers game. It was a weird thing. It was in Toronto. I was working for a TV network there, but the game was on a Sunday. And so the regular reporter was like, I don't want to work on a Sunday. I mean, it's Kobe Bryant, it's the Lakers. Like you don't want to work that game. Like, what are you doing this job for in the first place? Anyway, so an opportunity came where I was like, you can cover the Lakers game. Now, because I was an intern, I didn't have any direct access to Kobe, and they're not going to give you access to Kobe. They say, oh, well, fine, whatever. There's other reporters from different networks who have more seniority. But after the game, when Kobe came out and the Lakers lost that game by a point, Kobe missed a shot at the buzzer. And then I was just standing in his locker room area, and he came out, and all the Los Angeles media, there was like 100 cameras around, and I was right there like this, just like Kobe's here. And I'm just like, well, tell me what happened to that last shot, and all of a sudden he answered, he said, well, I got a good shot, just didn't go in. That happens, blah, blah, blah. The standard question. But that answer ran across Sports Center, across America and everywhere. It didn't include my question. It didn't say anything reference to me, but I was watching going, oh my God, that was my question that they all used as the soundbite. And then after that, because I was doing a feature on the Soccer World Cup in 2010, this is how long ago it was. And Kobe, I know, spent a lot of time in Italy growing up, and he spoke some Italian. I said to him, Kobe, I just want to ask you some questions about the World Cup, about Italy. Can you, I just like vomited words to him. And he said, sure, yeah, what do you got? And all of a sudden I grabbed my cameraman, I said, quick, turn the camera. And then I'm just like, Kobe, tell me about, football, and I knew he was friends with Ronaldinho, and he had a real connection. And he was amazing. Like for 2 minutes, I spoke with Kobe about soccer and Italy and stuff like that. And again, like that only happened because I was in that situation. It wasn't planned. There was no preparation as far as like Kobe knew I was going to ask him, or anyone helped set it up. It was just, I had a chance and I grabbed it, and it was, it was an incredible experience. And so I remember when I got back to the network, and the guy, the producer, sort of said, "Oh, so how did you go? Did you get any footage?" I said, "I just spoke with Kobe one-on-one." And the guy's like, "How?" And I said, I don't know. It just happened. It just happened. That's how.
Yeah. And what about that trip to Africa that you are preparing for, actually? Can you repeat the countries that you are going to, and what is the exact plan? And what about those details about the clinics and cooperation with all those kids?
Yeah, so it's South Africa. I'm going to Cape Town, and then Lusaka in Zambia, and Nairobi in Kenya. And the reason I chose those destinations was when I announced I was leaving the other show, the No Dunk show, all these people from those countries and cities messaged me on Instagram and said, "Hey, come out to Cape Town, come out to Lusaka, come out." Apparently, I've got a big audience in Lusaka in Zambia. Apparently, that's what they said. And so I was like, okay, this is the whole idea of what I'm trying to do, is to make this happen, is to respond to people who say, come to my city, come to my country and play, especially to places I've never been to before. And so I started talking with them, and I tried to coordinate it, and it's all coming together slowly. And so what I also really wanted to do that was important was not just turn up, play basketball and leave, because, as I said, that's kind of boring. Now, no one wants to watch me play basketball. So while I'm there, I'm trying to provide something for some kids and some local people there who will be able to come along, play a bit of basketball. And I've had a lot of NBA teams who I've contacted who are going to send me T-shirts and jerseys and hats or whatever that I'll be able to take to these clinics and give them to kids. And so, I'm not trying to save the world or anything like that, or save, give every kid an out or anything like that. But I'm just trying to contribute something. I'm trying to make people have a fun time and a fun experience. And while I get to travel and explore the world and meet people. And so that's what I'm trying to do. And if I can shoot this and turn it into a video series or a documentary series, that's where I hope people will see that I'm doing more than just playing basketball, that it's for boys and girls and for men and women from anywhere. Like, basketball is what brings us together. Like, I'm not going to ask anyone about their religion or their politics or their, and it's like, if you want to play basketball, come along and we'll play basketball. And hopefully I'll be able to give you a T-shirt and maybe even a basketball, but hopefully you'll get to have fun, because basketball ultimately at the end of the day is fun. And again, it comes back to, I've referenced my Belgrade Derby so many times because that was fun. That was fun. I mean, for Partizan fans, it was probably heartbreaking and devastating. For Zvezda,
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been practicing, like Radivojevic. I've got that one down now. But ultimately, that's what it is. I mean, basketball is fun. And when you have a great experience and a great game, you walk away going, man, I was so glad I got to experience that. And so that's what I'm hoping will happen in Africa, that people will go, I'm so glad, that I got to have a fun experience around basketball, and I'm going to try to make that happen.
Yeah, since you're going to Africa, I guess you know everything about Liz Mills. And since she is Australian, actually, she was head coach of the national team of Kenya. And maybe she can help you about all those interesting stories from Africa and from, from that part of the world in basketball terms. Yeah.
Yeah, well,
amazing.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I've actually had a few people from those various cities contact me and say, hey, you've got to do this. You've got to try that. You've got to experience this food and all those things. So that's the other part of it for me, is like Victoria Falls is right there on the border of Zambia and Zimbabwe, which I'm going to go and experience and see that while I'm there as well. And the Masai Mara in Kenya as well. I mean, that to me is something I've always wanted to see. So I'm going to try to incorporate all of that and make it into a series of features that people are going to go, oh, this looks like fun. I mean, that's ultimately like what it is about, is like having fun and having a great experience. And that's what I'm trying to do. So hopefully it comes off.
Yeah. Do you have any other plans after Africa, or did you even think about that?
Yes, I do. I definitely have plans. I haven't got them as far as booked any dates or times, but I'm hoping to go to basically the opposite end now and go to Scandinavia, around Finland, Iceland, Denmark, Sweden, places like that, Norway, and experience basketball on the complete opposite end, because in Africa it's going to be hot and dry.
Yeah.
And so in the Nordic Scandinavian countries there, it's going to be the opposite. Although I'm obviously not going to play in winter up there because it's going to be too dark and too much snow. So I'll go in the warmer months, but I would love to be able to play. There's a place in Norway, I think it is, or perhaps it's Finland anyway, where you can play basketball at midnight and the sun is shining. And it's like, so that to me is what's what I'm looking at a little bit further down the road. But for now, I'm just focusing on Africa, trying to get all that content ready. And then when I get back from that, putting it all together and then start planning the next stage of it. So, but I'm hoping in between that, I might be able to be in, Istanbul and Canals as well. So we'll see.
Yeah, I hope we're going to see each other. Maybe not in Istanbul, but in Kaunas for the Final Four. Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, I hope so too. I haven't got any information yet whether or not I will be going, but if the opportunity is presented to me, I can guarantee that I will take it again, because that would be a wild experience. I'm sure it'd be 4 or 5 days of just great basketball in a great city, and a lot of people there coming, to see their team win, which that makes a great atmosphere for me.
Yeah. So I hope we covered everything actually that was important about you and the basketball in general, about the NBA and the EuroLeague. But if you have something to add, you can add now, of course.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't know. I guess I just had a great experience, and it's been great to be a part of this here with you. Serbia was, I say Serbia, it was only Belgrade that I went to, but it was such a great experience that I am so hopeful that I will be back there again one day. And maybe we can do a basketball feature together. Do you play basketball?
Yeah, a little bit of basketball. Yeah, because I used to play, but only on that, school level. Yeah.
Well, maybe next time I'm there anyway, we can just shoot some hoops around anyway, and you can tell me a bit more, because like I say, the other Serbian girl that I met, she was like hitting all these crazy shots all over the place. So.
Yeah, I saw that. She's way too better than me.
But that's it. Maybe there's something about the Serbian girls there that are like, they're gonna, I don't know, end up taking all my money and showing me all these trick shots and things like that.
Yeah, of course, with rakia and then the cup of beers or something like that. Yeah,
that's right. I know. I'll end up drunk and have no money and there. But no, but it's been great. I've really enjoyed talking with you, Alex, and I hope we can cross paths again soon.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I hope that too. And thank you for enriching my list of guests, actually, and helping me to keep my audience in these hard times for me at my show. So I hope to see you in Kaunas, maybe earlier, but yeah, in Kaunas it would be a really like a basketball holiday. Yeah. It's a real basketball holiday. That Final Four of EuroLeague, it's something that you should experience. Yeah.
Yeah, again, especially in a place I've never been to before, I think that would be really appealing. So it's the end of May, isn't it? I think
it's the end of May, and the most interesting thing about the arena is actually the arena is on island. You know that?
Wow! Yeah. No, I didn't know that. No.
Yeah. The river, actually, the local river is around the arena, so it's very specific place. Yeah.
Wow, that's. Yeah, I mean, that's it. That's the whole experience, like learning something new, experiencing a different place. And that sounds great.
Yeah. So, I recommended you. So that was it. Yeah, thank you one more time. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I think we nailed it together. It's going to be interesting for basketball lovers to listen to this. And I hope that the next time that we are going to record something, you can be my guest in my own studio.
I hope so too. That would be fantastic.
Thank you.
Hvala.
Oh yeah, you learned some good words in Serbian.
Exactly. Dobro jutro. Hvala.
Yeah, good. Yeah, perfect.
Nadamo se da ste uživali u ovih sat i po zanimljive košarkaške priče koje sa nama podelio Li Elis. A sve ono što ste možda do sada propustili kada je reč o podcastu Uručenje pronađite na našem YouTube kanalu i naravno pratite nas na društvenim mrežama. Tamo nam pišite, predlažite, komentarišite i javljajte sve ono što ima zanimljivo iz sveta košarke. Trudit ćemo se da i u narednim epizodama pokrijemo sve ono što vas najviše zanima kada je reč o evropskoj i svetskoj košarkaškoj sceni. Hvala vam na pažnji i ostanite uz podcast Uručenje.